Afternoon. I greatly appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to talk a little bit about builder's risk. This is the topic. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into soft cost. Of all the questions that we get, this one is probably the most common. We get it almost every day. Question is, what is soft cost? How much do I need to cover? What exactly is covered? So we're going to take a pretty deep dive in this today. For the sake of you that haven't attended before, we're going to run through this in about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open this up to questions. And as always, the questions are whatever is on your mind, builder's risk related. We can talk about other things in builder's risk, but I think for the sake of time, we'll stick to builder's risk today. How's that? And then I'm going to end on the presentation and talk a little bit about our digital platform. We've done some work on it. It's really doing well, and I think you'll find that interesting. So without further ado, let's get into this. So in order to understand soft costs, I think we have to take a little bit of a view of everything else. So let's talk about completed value builder's risk. We've talked about this before, and this is the way builder's risk is written in the United States today. So what that says is builder's risk rates in the United States are promulgated on going from 0 amount at risk to 100% at risk at the end of the project. So what we want to do, though, is in the beginning, we want to write the policy for the completed value of the project. And the question always comes up, what's the completed value? So I figured I'd just show you the definition. And to give you the idea of some of these things today, this is right off our coverage form. It's not a definition I made up. It's actually verbatim from our form. And our form is proprietary. It's kind of a hybrid between ISO and AAIS and other things that we've, that I've done in my past. But this is our definition of completed value. I could read it to you, but I think the easier thing to do is what I've always told builders when I talk to builders. They say, what are you going to sell the house for? And the builder said, I'm going to sell it for $1 million. The next question is, well, how much land value is in that $1 million? And let's just say he goes, yeah, that lot, I got about 200,000 in the lot. So then you're going to say, okay, so about $800,000 of the $1 million selling price is construction cost, your cost. He goes, yeah, that's about right. And I go, that's everything. He goes, that's everything. That's labor, materials, overhead. That's even my profit in that 800,000. So I said, there you go. That's what we're going to write our policy for then. And that's how you tackle completed value builder's risk. Selling price minus land equals your completed value. So, if you want to get more detailed, you can break out the labor, materials, overhead, but it's all covered. It's all covered on the form, as long as you've written it in the beginning for that completed value. So this is, hopefully everybody understands that. If you want to talk about this later, you'll have my contact information and we can go over it. So now let's take our next step into this. Holy cow, definition of soft cost. This once again is right off our coverage form. This is what it says. So we say, all right, so everything we had before, I've heard some people call hard cost, but that's not necessarily true either. So just keep in mind completed value, selling price minus land. So now we got this thing called soft cost. So the key to understanding soft cost is in that first sentence, a delay period. So we have to have a delay period in order to trigger the soft cost coverage. And the next screen is going to define delay period, so hold that thought. So we have a delay period, and then we're going to say, what is a soft cost? So during the delay period, you're going to have certain reoccurring expenses. I like that word, reoccurring. They're going to occur again. And so you can see some of these: interest upon money borrowed, realty taxes, advertising fees, architect and engineer fees, administration expense, legal and accounting fees, insurance premiums. And the last sentence on this, to me, is a catch-all. I really like the last sentence. Other similar costs you incur over and above the costs that you typically would have incurred during the course of construction. It's all back to that delay period. I have a delay, I have additional costs. So what are those additional costs? Keep in mind that is the definition of soft costs. Next is, what is the definition of a delay period? Because we had to have that, that's the trigger. Delay period means the period of time between the scheduled date of completion and the actual date on which operations or use and occupancy can begin with the exercise of due diligence and dispatch. I like that. due diligence and dispatch. Sounds very, very formal. So the delay period is just that, is the scheduled date of completion, and then now what's the actual date of completion? Now you have this delay period. Pretty simple, right? Definition of soft cost, definition of delay period. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time on this next screen, because I really think this is the crux of the whole thing. This is the language in the form that addresses soft costs, okay? We will pay the actual soft cost arising out of the delay period. To the extent such expenses are actually necessarily incurred by you to enable you to begin your operations in the manner originally planned. Think about that for a second. You know, what you originally planned to finish on April 1st, but now you're not going to finish till May 1st. So that delay period, what's that costing you? Soft costs must be incurred during the delay period, and such delay period must be caused by or result from direct physical loss or damage by a covered cause of loss at or within 100 feet of the premises shown in the declarations or while in transit. So that's really the crux of the whole matter. We had this little thing called a pandemic in the last couple of years. It's ongoing. It's called some delay. So was the pandemic, was the COVID virus a covered cause of loss on property forms? The vast majority of property forms. Of course, the answer is no. So it was not a covered cause of loss. So thus there is no soft cost. Thus there is no business interruption because it wasn't covered. The peril wasn't covered. So that's the thing that you always have to ask yourself when you're thinking about soft cost. What caused the delay? We know what the delay period is. We know what soft costs are. Now we're saying what caused it. If it was a covered peril, if it was a fire, if it was lightning, if it was theft, if it was vandalism, all those things we know are covered on the form and they cause a delay, that would trigger the soft cost. So I think that's really what people get confused on. They think of soft cost and they forget that it originally has to be covered on the form. The coverage form we're attaching the soft cost to. And then it says the most we will pay under this additional coverage is the amount shown in the supplemental declarations for soft cost. And I'm going to tell you a little secret about our form, which we're very proud of. We build in $100,000 of soft costs automatically to every form, every policy we sell. So for the prototypical custom builder building homes, soft cost is already taken care of in our form. You don't have to ask for it. You don't have to pay for it. It's already built in. Pretty rare in the industry. There's not a lot of forms that build it in. Most carriers will cover it, but you have to add it. You got to pay a premium, and sometimes you got to show a worksheet and do different things. So just remember, for our typical builder that we write, be it a small commercial general or residential, we build in that 100,000 automatically. You can increase it, just have to let us know. Soft cost worksheet. We've had this out there for you for a while because a lot of people ask for it. All that is for our program, let's say you're going to write a larger builder building larger stuff and you know he needs more than 100,000, but you don't know what he needs. Well, you can fill out this worksheet with them, more of an accounting worksheet. It lists all these potential soft costs and you're asking the builder, how much does this cost? So you could come to an agreement at the end of this is how much soft cost I need. I need 200,000. I need 300,000, whatever I need. So you could offer him, so you can cover the right amount. And I think what we're trying to get to, and I've been kind of struggling with this a little bit, but we're going to recommend coverages for you. And we've done this a long time. We understand builder's risk. We understand the type of insurance that we have. So we're going to recommend limits for you. I'm all about coverage. I love selling coverage, but at some point, case in point, I had an agent the other day. It was a $2 million building, and they wanted to cover $5 million of flood. I kind of scratched my head, and I called him, and I said, he goes, I just thought that would make sense. I said, well, we talked for a while, and needless to say, we did not write $5 million flood on a $2 million building. So same thing with soft costs. 100,000 is probably going to be enough for the vast majority of your smaller contractors. If you need more, by all means, ask us, but we build in the 100,000 automatically. That was kind of that's soft cost in about 10 minutes. So I know you're going to have a lot of questions, so I'll leave some time for questions. But once again, understanding what is completed value builder's risk, what are all the costs that are covered on the normal form, Next thing is, what is the delay period? Next thing is, what is covered by soft cost? And lastly is, what triggers the coverage? So it has to be a covered cause of loss that triggers the coverage, a reoccurring expense, a delay during the delay period. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And I would advise, even I have to do, I've been doing this a long time, and every once in a while, I have to go back to the form and refresh my memory on exactly how it's worded. I would recommend that for you too. This is a good tool. This little thing I put together here, I think is a good tool for you guys, and we'll make sure it's on the website and you can access it. So anytime the term soft cost comes up, you're going to think about that. Another little tip too, and the confusion that arises a lot of times for agents is they confuse soft cost with loss of rents, loss of income, and other type of time element coverages that you can get on builder's risk. That's a different animal, okay? So it's a little confusing because, for example, AAIS on their delay in completion form, it has different coverage sections, one of those sections being soft cost. So it is a delay in completion coverage, but it's not loss of rents and it's not loss of income. It is soft cost. So it's a different coverage. So just remember that, because we get a lot of times people saying, I need this in coverage because they're building a hotel and there's going to be rents and this and that. And we have to walk them through that. Do you need loss of rents or do you need soft costs? Two different things. Hopefully this is all starting to sink in. So last thing we're going to cover today, and we're going to kind of pivot a little bit. And now we're going to talk about what I consider kind of the heart of our program. So we created a program a number of years ago, and we said the first thing we got to do is we got to have a good coverage form. So we have 19 automatic coverages, soft cost being one of them. The next thing I said, okay, so we got a good coverage form. We got to set our rates so we're competitive. We don't want to be the cheapest in the market, but we want to be very competitive. We've done that. We want to have capacity. So we have capacity now. We write business in 48 states. We're not in Alaska and Hawaii, but we're everywhere else. We do write frame construction. So we have plenty of capacity. And then the next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to build a digital platform that allowed our agents to quote, bind, and issue in a very short period of time. And we have done that. We call it V squared, and it's working very well. And we've made some adjustments to it over time. And the adjustments are, it just gets easier. We ask less questions. So most agents are saying the way they judge a program is how many questions do you ask. If you ask too many questions, it takes too much time. So we're reducing the questions. So here's what I kind of want you to understand. Other thing I get asked all the time, agents say, well, what do you want to write? Describe the risk that you want to write. So here I'm going to take a stab at that. The perfect risk for us, probably, and for you, would be a risk that passes through our platform with no underwriting holes. So we say, all right, let's think about what passes through. So the first thing is it needs to be ground up new construction. So it's a ground up new project. All right, that's good. Next thing is, what are we going to ask you to provide us in order to give you a bindable quote? And so we're going to go through this list right here. There's like 7 or 8 things, nothing out of the ordinary. First of all, we need information on the builder. Make sure they have 2 years experience, they know what they're doing. We need a start date. If you're going to write a policy, we need to have an effective date. So tell us when you want this thing to start. We need the address of the property under construction. Kind of important, right? We have to know what property we're on. We do get asked, maybe it's a new subdivision and there's not an exact address. We'll get as exact as you can. Sometimes it's lot 4, this subdivision, and if that's as good as you can get, as long as we can identify that piece of property, we're okay with that. Construction classification. Now we're kind of getting into the property code construction. What is it? Is it frame? Is it masonry non-combustible? Is it fire resistive? On our website, we actually define each one of these, so it's pretty simple. I will tell you, if you're writing detached single family, 93% of homes are framed today. That's just the way they build homes in the United States. They are building some concrete and steel homes in South Florida, but that's not really caught on everywhere else yet. So mostly frame, which is fine. We need to know the completed value. We just went through that. So we know what that is, selling price minus land. You got to tell us what deductible you want. We can go from 1,000 to 50,000 on deductibles. We need to know the ISO protection class. So it's 1 to 10. You got to pick one. Pick 1 or 10 or someone in between. Hopefully, you know what the protection class is in your area. And then the last question that we have to know is, even though it's ground up new, how far along is it? If it is less than 30% built, no problem, passes right through. It's more than 30%, generates a hold, and we're going to ask some questions. So this is ground up new. So if it meets that criteria in our program, up to $1.5 million in coastal areas and up to $3 million in inland areas, it's going to pass through to a bindable quote. To give you an idea, we have an agent in Tennessee, and one of the CSRs in the agency quote bound and issued a policy in 1 minute and 37 seconds. And that particular CSR issued 24 policies in one morning. So it can be done. It's very, very simple, very basic information, and we're very proud of that. So I strongly encourage you to go in and try V squared and keep us in mind for all your, we'll call it the ground up new, well, 5 million, $1.5 million less, 3 million less inland. Keep us in mind for that. Give us a shot. I think you'll find the experience is a good one. So there you have it. So in 20 minutes, I basically covered soft cost and gave you a brief commercial on our digital platform and the business that we want to write for Victor Builders Risk. So hopefully you're all stunned. I kept you awake for a little bit. And what we're going to do, before I get to the next thing too, Brandon's on the line from Atlanta. He's our coil. And I was going to say, Brandon, you want to touch on what you're seeing on the pass-through bindable quote stuff that you're seeing in Atlanta? Are you there, Brandon? Hello, hello, hello. Must have lost it. All right, guys. So what we're going to do now is open this up to questions. Anybody have any questions of any kind? Darcy?
Yep, we've got quite a few questions, Jeff, so let's get started. Is there a rule of thumb that can be used for soft cost, as in a percentage of the finished value?
I will give you a rule of thumb, but I will strongly encourage you to, you can do the worksheet if you want to do it, but for the most part, about 10% of the cost of a project will be reoccurring soft cost. So for $1 million structure, 100,000 that we build in automatically should be adequate. And it might even go a little higher than that. So I'd probably stretch that to $1.5 million. So if they're building $1.5 million building, 100,000 is probably adequate. As it gets above that, you probably want to start thinking about increasing it. So general rule of thumb. Good question. All
right. Is $3 million the maximum total completed value for a project that you will offer?
No, that's what I call the pass-through risk. So in inland areas, up to $3 million in value, if it meets the criteria on this screen, it will pass through with no hold. Now in our program, we can go up to 5 million frame and 10 million for M&C and fire resistant. So those are the maximum limits we can offer in our program. Good question.
All right. Do you provide 6-month policies or only yearly policies?
So we are very flexible on the available terms. So basically, what do you need? So if we have a project that's going to take 6 months, we could write a 6-month policy. If it's going to take 12 months, we'll write a 12-month policy. If it's going to take 9 months, but you're not quite sure, go ahead and write the 12-month policy, and we'll be off and running. So really, we're very flexible. We could even go over the 12 months, and we can go up to 24 months readily, maybe even above that if you give us a call. But the vast majority, I would say 75% of our book of business on ground up new is written at 12 months. Because that really begs the question, what is the average length of time it takes to build and sell a house in the United States today? Now that's changed. Okay, and it does vary by where you're at, whether you're in the Northeast or the Southeast. The Northeast takes the longest, Southeast takes the shortest. But average in the United States now is approaching 9 to 10 months. That's the average. That means half the book is over that, half's under. So you get the idea that a year is probably a good way to write this business. So I would advise you for ground up new construction, start with 12 months and work your way probably up from there. So good question.
All right. What is the limit for frame builder's risk outside of the pass-through program?
We can do up to 5 million frame. It's $1.5 million frame coastal, 3 million inland pass-through, and then over that we can go up to 5 million frame.
All right. Do you need a separate appointment for V-squared?
You need to be registered for V-squared. So if you have any questions on that, if you just go to the Victor website, it'll walk you through how to register. We're going to give you, I think on my next screen, I will give you the 800 number. I'll make sure you have the 800 number and you can call that and we'll get you registered. So you do have to register to get access to V-squared. And just a little plug for my other programs that I'm affiliated with. We have a real estate professional, we have an A&E professional, we have management liability, cyber liability, land surveyors. Am I leaving something out, Darcy? Brandon, help me out there. We have other programs that are on V-squared too. It's not just builder's risk. So it's definitely worth your while to go get registered.
All right. Now, are your policies fully earned?
Our policies, for the most part, are fully earned. We have, if it's a very large risk and we get into a beyond a year, we could probably do a pro rata if we had to, or we could just write it for a length of time. The question that we have, and this is a tough one, is people say, I want to write an 8-month policy. So we know it's going to take longer than 8 months. So what's going to happen at the end of 8 months, we have to extend it. So you're going to have to remember to call us, and then we're going to have to extend it. So if you forget to call us and it doesn't get extended, we got a problem. So it's much easier to do 12 months fully earned. We don't have to worry about it for 12 months. And if it's still ongoing after 12 months, you call us and we'll extend it for however long we need to extend it. And I will say that a whole bunch of our business in the last 6 to 8 months has been extended. And the reason being, things are being delayed. It's taking longer to build stuff these days. Shortages of materials, shortages of labor, things are taking longer than normal. That's just a fact. Good question.
All right. Are there any restrictions on coastal properties?
We do have, we'll call it like supplemental questions. As you get through and you're looking through V-squared, and there is a couple of questions. One of the coastal questions we ask is the structure within 1,000 feet of the coastline? So if it's within 1,000 feet of the coastline, we will not write that risk. So, and that's a little bit arbitrary. So what I would say is if there's a doubt, pick up the phone and call our 800 number. We can map it for you and we can talk about it. And I will say sometimes it's, maybe it's 1,000 feet from the intercoastal, but it's well over 1,000 feet from the ocean, and we will write that risk for you. There's a little subjective, little leeway there, but that's one of the coastal guidelines. But other than that, it's pretty much, we write a lot of business tier 1 all throughout the Southeast and up the East Coast. Obviously we don't want to write all our business there. I look at the amount of accumulations all the time, but we're doing fine. And when you have a program where you write detached ground up new construction, you're obviously going to have a lot of coastal exposures because that's where a lot of people are moving these days. Good question. Just keep in mind that these questions are automatically built in. So it's like a cascading thing. Once the digital platform knows where the risk is located, it will ask these additional questions. Same thing for protection class 9 and 10. Once you put that in there, it's going to ask a few more questions because it's 9 and 10. Good question.
All right. So do you recommend covering partial soft cost line items?
All right, Darcy, you got to run that one by me again. You lost me. Partial.
partial soft cost line items?
I guess I might have to take that one offline. I'll call the agent direct. But, to me, soft cost is soft cost. And you go back to that last line and what's covered, and it says all similar costs that are reoccurring. So it's kind of a catch-all. So as long as you have, well, for our program, you have 100,000 built in, whether it's partial or whatever, it's all covered as long as it's on that list or similar to the things that we define soft cost as. But I'll call the agent direct and have a little talk with them.
All right. Is there a good source for protection classes for locations around the country?
Yeah, I wish there was a third party that would verify ISO protection class easily and, for cost effective. I don't know of one. I know we have the ability to get close to it, but we can't give you the exact protection class. What I've told most agents is, talk to a friend of mine the other day too. If you call the local fire department and kind of talk to them about protection class, they'll give you a good idea of the area. I mean, most of an urban environment is protected. So if you're in the Atlanta, for example, most of Atlanta is a protection class 3. Now, as you move further away from the urban area, you might get up in the mountains, and the mountains are notorious for creating some 9s and 10s. So probably the trickiest areas are where it's mountainous. To give you an idea, Southern California is very tricky. You can have a protection class 2, and yet you can stand out on your front porch and look out the window, and on the top of the nearest mountain, it's a 9, and you can see it. So those get a little tricky where it goes one right next to each other. So I don't see a lot of 9 and 10 on the East Coast, mostly in the rural areas and the mountainous areas. But when in doubt, call the local fire department, even if it's a volunteer fire department, and they will give you a lot of information. I did a whole webinar on protection classes. I recommend you go listen to it. Some things you could say, like, if there's a fire department within 5 miles, it might be protected. If there's not one within 5 miles, it's definitely not protected. If there's a working fire hydrant within 1,000 feet, it's probably protected. If not, it's unprotected. So there's certain rules of thumb that you're going to know whether it's protected or not. And in our program, we kind of 1 to 7 flows through the system. We hold 8s because we look at them, and then 9 and 10s get held sometimes depending on value. So all you got to do is determine if it's 1 to 7, and if it's one of those, it'll flow through. Good question. I recommend watching our webinar on protection classes.
All right. Can you extend the term?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. So let's say we write a 12-month policy, and it's a $2 million home. And at the end of 12 months, you say there's still 20% left to build. We think it's going to take another 3 months. Then we'll just extend that original policy for 3 months, and you're off and running. That's the way we prefer to do it. I guess you could have written it for 15 months in the beginning if you knew that's what it was going to take, but most people don't. So that's the way the extension works. So yeah, we do that every day.
All right. So what is the best way to separate soft costs between a time element and a non-time element?
All right, well, I'm going to punt a little bit on that one, because if you go to that, if you go to the definition of soft cost on our form, and it lists those, 8 or 10, we know those are soft costs: advertising fees, architect fees, insurance premiums. Those are not time element. Those are not, loss of income. Then if you go to the worksheet, it lists more finite examples of that. And then the next thing, we're probably going to have to do a workshop on loss of rents and loss of income, because that's a whole nother animal as far as how you calculate how much you need and whether you need it or not. The typical detached single-family builder does not need loss of income and loss of rents. It's not really an exposure that they need to worry about. They do need soft costs, but not those. So if you're writing, you're writing a developer that's going to develop a strip center, and obviously rental income is going to be a big part of that. That's when you got to look at it. So I mean, it just depends on, the first question is look at your insurer. Who's the insured, and do they really need loss of rents or loss of income? Good question.
All right. So at what point would a builder's risk policy no longer respond? For instance, if we are 95% completed, do we need to transition to a property policy?
Good question. So you'd have to go to the form and look at when coverage ceases. And there's 9 or 10 things that cause the coverage to cease. The simple fact that it's 95% done, it can be 100% done and you still have coverage. So that's not really a criteria. I will say this though, the sooner you can transition to permanent insurance, I would advise you do that because that's where it should be, that's where the property should be covered. But under our form, if the building is occupied for more than 90 days, coverage ceases. Once the building becomes rental property, coverage ceases. There might be endorsements we could attach to make sure the coverage goes on, but those are some of the triggers that could cause coverage to cease. Good question.
All right. So we are over time, but we do have quite a few more questions if you want to keep going, Jeff.
Let's take a couple more, and then whatever I don't get to, I will call them myself and have a discussion with them. How's that? Let's take 2 more. I could go all day, but people have things to do. So.
All right. Here's the first one. Do you write catastrophe exposed builder's risk?
Yeah, I mean, we write business up and down the East Coast and the Southeast Gulf Coast. We write business in the convective storm areas of the Midwest and the Southeast. We write business in the wildfire areas of the West. I will say we take a hard look at all of those areas and we do underwrite accordingly. But yes, we do write business in those areas.
All right, and last question. Here's kind of a long one, so get ready.
All right.
If you have a project with significant hard cost associated with things like existing conditions, site work, etc., that would not be incurred again. If you had to rebuild following a covered loss, should that be insured? Does that count as a % completed if ground has been broken, but there is really nothing there to be insured yet?
You had to ask me one like that. I probably would take that offline and call them. But you know, the site work, okay, if it's not a reoccurring expense, then it's not reoccurring. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. But so I thought the question was maybe is it, you know, how do we get to that reoccurring expense? Now, in the original coverage, site work is covered, right? I mean, it's labor, I guess. So you got to pay someone to sit on a backhoe and, you know, level the lot, front end loader, whatever they got to do, road grader. So there is an exposure, maybe the rough plumbing is being put in even before the foundation. All of that is part of that selling price that I talked about earlier. So I would include all of that. Now, perhaps when you have a claim, even if it's a total claim, some of that stuff does not reoccur, so you don't need to worry about the soft cost portion of that. So I think that's what they're driving at, but it's a good question. But leave that one on the list for me to call, Darcy. How's that?
Sounds good, Jeff.
How we doing? Think we've had enough for the day?
All right. Do you want to do one more? I just got a couple questions that all came in asking the same thing. Do you offer permission to occupy coverage?
All right. Got me on a roll. Let's do one more.
Okay. Do you offer permission to occupy coverage?
Yes. No, I mean, so I said earlier on our standard form, we have 90 days coverage on a residential. If it's commercial, there's a little different criteria, but let's say it goes over that. We can add permission to occupy. We're going to make a charge for it. And we can even go to 100% depending on the occupancy of the structure. But I will say what the rates get expensive on permission to occupy, because if you think about it, what you're doing is you're really approaching permanent property insurance. So once you do that, you've kind of crossed a bridge from builder's risk to permanent. But yes, we can do that as an optional coverage. And one thing I noticed that's not on this screen is the 800 number, Darcy. So I just want to make sure that they all know the easiest way to get through to a human on our program is 800-944-7472. Maybe we can send that out to them, Darcy, somehow, but I just want to make sure that they know that's the 800 number for us here in Jacksonville. And you can call us direct. It just, sometimes we get busy and we can't get to that. But by all means, send emails, text me, whatever you want to do. And if you have any questions on builder's risk at all, even if it's a larger account, things that are kind of beyond us, I enjoy talking. I do know a lot of people in the industry, so I'm here to help you if I can. So just think of us as builder's risk, and we're here to talk about it. We're here to help you. So in closing, I just say once again, thanks a lot for your taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to our story, and stay tuned. We'll be back next month with another subject. That's all I got for you today, Darcy.